Welcome. NINO has just issued its 2019 Global Climate Report. This video is a summary of that report. NINO lists a number of significant climate events for February of 2019. There are 6 areas that are considered to have temperatures much above normal: Alaska, the Southeast United States, South America, Europe, Northern Russia, and Australia. There are 2 areas that have much below average temperatures. That's Canada and the Western United States, and Central Asia. Both the Arctic and Antarctic sea ice extent is at its 7th lowest on record. There were significant rains in Israel and Jordan, causing major floods, and we had a typhoon Wu-tip in the Western Pacific. Overall, February was the 5th warmest February on record. The oceans were the 2nd warmest ever recorded, the land the 15th warmest. This is out of 140. And the Northern Hemisphere was the 20th warmest, mainly because of the low temperatures in North America. And the Southern Hemisphere was the 2nd warmest. We've been hearing a lot recently about how cold a winter this has been, record cold and all things like that. However, globally, this was the 4th warmest meteorological winter, that's from December through February, on record, that's out of 140, with a temperature of 0.84 degrees centigrade above the 20th century average. The land was 8th warmest, the ocean 2nd warmest, the Northern Hemisphere was 6th warmest, and the Southern Hemisphere was 2nd warmest. This is a map of the departure of the average temperature from the overall average for that particular area. And as you can see, there are some very cold areas in Canada and North America, and also in Central Asia. Similarly, there are some warm areas in Alaska, Europe, and Northern Russia. Now, are any of these records? Well, you can't actually tell until you go to the percentiles map, and that's what we will do next. Now, this is the percentiles map, and that shows you where there's record cold and record heat. That area up in Canada and the Northern United States was not a record area, it was just much cooler than average. However, there's hundreds of pixels on this map that offset that by being much warmer than average. And in fact, there are 56 pixels on this map that set record high temperatures. So this would still indicate that we have a warming world. Another indication of whether we have a warming world is whether there are more record highs set than record lows. Looking at the daily records, we have 5,034 record highs set in February compared with 4,845 record lows. That's a ratio of 1.04 to 1, so the highs have it just marginally. However, year to date, there's a very different picture. We have 9,031 record highs compared with just 5,804 record lows. That's a ratio of 1.5 to 1 and indicates that the world is warming still. Here you can see I've added February of 2019 to a matrix of warmest months. And so far 2019 is outpacing both 2014 and 2018 as a warmest year. And so that would put it overall in 4th position if this pace is maintained. However, there's a lot of time to go yet, and we'll have to see how intense and how long the current El Nino lasts. Now let's take a look at the upper atmosphere. This is the satellite data from the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and remote sensing systems. For the lower troposphere, that's an altitude on average of about 4 kilometers. UAH made it the 5th warmest February on record, RSS the 4th warmest. They had a warming trend of 0.16 degrees centigrade per decade, which is remarkably similar to the surface temperature trend. The mid-troposphere, an average of about 7 kilometers, both of them found that it was the 5th warmest February on record, and the trend there is slightly lower at 0.12 degrees centigrade per decade. As we all know, the stratosphere is cooling, that's an average altitude of about 17 kilometers. Both groups found it to be the 4th coolest on record, with an average cooling trend of 0.27 degrees centigrade per decade. Now let's take a look at Northern Hemisphere sea ice extent. In February of 2019, it was the 7th lowest on record. That's the 17th consecutive year that we've had below average sea ice in the Arctic. The story in the southern hemisphere is very similar. In the Antarctic, it was the 7th lowest sea ice extent on record and the 4th consecutive year with below average sea ice there. El Nino is still here, though it's a mild one. It's been that way for the last 3 months. It's exceeded the 0.5 degree threshold for the NINO 3.4 index value. Anything above 0.5 is considered an El Nino. Anything below minus 0.5 is considered a La Nina, and anything in between is considered neutral. The forecast for the next few months is quite different depending on which model you believe. If you believe the statistical forecast, we will remain in an El Nino until May, then we'll slip into ENSO neutral conditions, and then El Nino will re-establish itself towards the end of the year. If you believe the dynamical model forecast, we'll remain in an El Nino until May or June, and then slip into ENSO neutral conditions for the rest of the year. Let's take a look at some greenhouse gases. First of all, carbon dioxide on the left. It's at 411.8 parts per million and still rising. And on the right we have methane, that's at 1.87 parts per million and rising slowly. Let's see if we can summarize all of this. February in 2019 was the 5th warmest February on record, that's out of 140 years. We've had 409 consecutive months with temperatures above the 20th century average. El Nino has arrived, but is likely to be mild and short-lived. My prediction is that 2019 will be the 4th warmest year on record. So until next time, goodbye.